Hey everybody, hope week 10 is treating you guys pretty well and hope this assignment went well too. So, global cities was my topic for this presentation, and upon seeing that, what came to mind for me was pretty much the idea of like a sister city. Like they say that about cities that have similar demographics, internationally they're across the ocean, but they have similar kind of layouts and similar ideals. So the reason I bring that up is just I feel that global cities is like pretty much reflective of globalization and imperialism that we've covered all throughout this entire term. So I kind of see it more in like the creative realm, the media realm, and hopefully positive realms in general, and kind of like how we've seen the whole idea of Americanization just overtake international media so heavily. So when I kind of dived into researching global cities throughout my notes and what we've covered throughout this term, I really just had to pinpoint Americanization to begin. Like cultural aspects of a country's information, morals, and social norms are really important to understand. Like these foundational aspects of a region or country are reflective of the place itself and how things go, and therefore create a whole understanding of that society itself. The foundational norms and facts. So these kind of complex and sometimes contradictory things that have developed throughout centuries and centuries really are reflective of the people within that country. However, as media has expanded so much throughout the last 100 years, we've seen impacts of America and the West in general just overtake media so much. In this class, we've covered so many examples from pop music, K-pop, to film and Hollywood and stuff like that. So I really see all of that as global cities forming in as a kind of a mirror image of American culture. Values like social interaction and overall complexities of society can kind of be dissipated by taking on Western values, and it can be a bad thing overall. But this whole media globalization is a strategy that aims to spread as widely as possible, and there's a risk and reward to commercialization of media in general. And I feel like nowadays in 2021, globalization and connecting of the cultures throughout the world is greater than ever before. It's very indicative of cultural diversity, which is honestly a great thing. It's very positively affecting diversity by educating people of American culture or Western culture in general, as well as it allows people to be very much more creative than they may have ever thought. A lot of different cities, not cities, but different nations around the world are much more conservative or perhaps have different values that kind of make people feel more locked in and not be able to express themselves. And I think that a lot of Western values might, be a little more liberal and allow for people to have a lot more expression and to identify with a lot more things that are beneficial. Now, this little generic little infographic that PowerPoint brought up, I left it blank because I just like the idea of a flow like that. I think that take some for example, pop music in America, and that can flow into K-pop music, which can eventually flow into J-pop in different countries. Just one example that you covered pretty in depth the other day in class. That's why it comes to mind. But I just think that the creative culture, has a global impact, and the flow of it is very interesting. It can be tracked to so many different subcultures inside of music, inside of movie, film and media. Just so much it can be tracked in different small, intricacies can be followed as well. And I just think it's interesting. I think creating these global cities and linking people together through Americanization can be seen, I hate to say it, in a positive light. I think it does a lot for the creative arts. And to answer my own question that's on the screen, I feel there is like agencies that there is a need for Westernization and a want for it. Like people that create advertisements in general, they want large scale marketing. That's an overall goal. Worldwide networks and small micro networks, independent networks, they do aim for a international climate and international growth, and I think it's almost inevitable for humans to be influenced by one another. So it kind of makes sense that Americanization kind of sweeps the world by storm. So I don't know if it's considered cheating, but I guess I am kind of cheating for this little part right here. But back back in week 7, I read a an article for the week 7 news story called "U.S. Faces Challenge of De-Americanization." I just found this really interesting because it was written for the Global Times China by Ding Gang, and it was pretty much a whole spiel about how 2020 really fared in terms of America and Americanization, and why people might be steering clear in America of American ideals. So we I think back in maybe week 5 or something like that, we covered a lot of globalization by Americans in Asia. So Asia itself is a continent heavily affected by cultural, media, and business globalization from the West. Um, but the whole political and tumultuous nature of 2020, the sheer disparity in agreements between federal and state policy, and the pandemic, as well as the election itself, and just our whole face to the world has just been so nuts and so everywhere. Many say America is failing to socialist or communist ideas with our new president and policies regarding the economics of COVID. Gang kind of reiterated that by saying like the pandemic accelerated the U.S. speed of policy adjustment, which brings a lot of structural change. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but uh, this overt opinion change in America is reflective of how like almost all developing countries face challenges in Americanization as their economies develop. Gang said, to put it simply, under the market economy, capitalist forces have had a strong impact on all fronts of society, including the social system and people's values. The developing countries must pay a high heed to social equity from the initial stage of economic development. They must establish their own security and own image. And I think that it was interesting that Gang like insists that the nature of American citizens' trust in our government has been stripped away in light of the pandemic, and this quote unquote de-Americanization is happening within our own population. There's just so much dispute, and like I said earlier about how people think, oh, we're going to the ways of socialism, the ways of communism. It just kind of shows that there's not as much stability as we like to advertise in America. And I think that this coming down is, in a way, it makes sense that he would title his article as such, because it really does show that America isn't perfect, the West isn't perfect. It can be looked at as kind of like a pinnacle in the world, first quote unquote first world country. I don't like to use that term, but that's what we're looked at, and I think it's pretty interesting that de-Americanization does occur, and perhaps maybe global cities will impact us more. We'll have a lot more of an impact from them. I mean, of course, there is people that love other cultures in America, and that's one thing I do love about this country. We are very affected by international, just other countries in general, very accepting of it. We're a melting pot country, like they like to say, especially in Portland. But I think that this overall globalization, it's definitely in a very interesting place as America right now, because our own country is just so unstable, and it's even being reflected in Chinese media as so.